I have a question for you and for you also. If I go from C to F, is this an upward or downward modulation? Down. See, even he gets it. Okay, if your answer was upward, you probably need to watch this section of the video because, come on, you're gonna let old Daniel be better than you. However, if you answered correctly, skip to this time in the video. You might have seen this. It's called the circle of fifths, and what you need to know about it is that when you go in the clockwise direction, it's also called the sharp direction because each key gets one more sharp than the previous one. If you go counterclockwise, it's called the flat direction because each key gets one more flat than the previous one. Now, the direction of the modulation, either upwards or downwards, has nothing to do at all with the placement of the notes on the keyboard or the pitch of the notes. If a note is higher in pitch, that doesn't necessarily mean it's an upward modulation. What defines if it's an upward or downward modulation is the placement of the key on the circle of fifths. And what do I mean by that? If you go from C to G, you are going in the sharp direction, which means it's an upward modulation. If you go from C to F, you are going in the flat direction, which means it's a downward modulation. So remember that. More sharps, if you're going to a key that has more sharps, it's an upward modulation. If you're going to a key that has less sharps or more flats, it's a downward modulation. Sharp, up, flat, down. One more thing before we move on. The closer two keys are together on circle of fifths, the easier it is to switch between them. Now to the fun part. There are a lot of techniques to switch keys, and by a lot I mean like more than 10. However, for the sake of this video, I will only talk about one of them, which I like to call the EPIC Modulation. And why do I call it like that? Watch that short clip and you'll get what I mean. That was an original piece of music that I wrote, and as you can tell, I actually really like doing this type of modulation. And it's based around the dominant chord and a perfect cadence. And what that means is that when you go from the 5 chord, which is the dominant, to the 1 chord, that is the tonic, it's a very satisfying resolution because you're going from tension to hope. And I'm not just going to talk about it, I'm gonna walk you through it so you know how to use it. Now, unfortunately, I don't have a real piano anymore. It's not gone, but it's in a different place. But anyway, let's start learning how to do this. Okay, so I'll start on C major, but we are in E minor. So C is just the 6th chord. C, then I go to D. Next, I should go to E minor, right? Because it's the tonic, it's the key we're in. But instead, I go to E major. And what is E major? It's the dominant of which key? A minor. See what I did there? It's the perfect cadence. I went from the 5 chord to the 1 chord. Now we are in A minor. Let's do it one more time. A major. Now A major is the dominant of which key? D minor. See what I'm doing? Let's do it also one more time. From D minor to D major. Okay, now I'm in E minor. Let's talk about that. If you were paying attention, you might have noticed that D is not the dominant of E minor. But how did we do it? If you remember the circle of fifths, D is the 5 of G, which means D major is the dominant chord of G major. And every major key has a relative minor key. G major and E minor are relative keys, which means they share all the same notes. To the ear, it's the same thing, although theoretically it's a different key, but when you listen to it, it sounds the same. That's why we could go from D to E minor. So remember this, you are on the minor 1 chord, go to the major 1, and that becomes now the dominant of the next key. Also, if you still cannot figure out all the notes in any key in a matter of seconds, click on this video, I'll show you how.